Hello everyone, my name is Alex. In the previous video, we saw how to read and write values to the cells in a worksheet. In this video, we are going to learn how we can actually change the format of the text or the cells that contain our values. For example, we can do the following. We have in the cell 11, we are setting the value this is a text. If we would like to set our text to bold, just by simply putting font.bold equal true, when we execute this code, our font will be bold. This is the same if, for example, we want our font, for example, as italic. This also works for the size of the text. So for example, we can now use font, size, and a number. By default, Microsoft Excel uses a size of 11. Let's say we want, for example, a size of 20. If we can now execute this code, we can now go to Microsoft Excel and see what is the result of this. As you can see, here we have our text, which basically has a size of 20, it's italic and bold. As you might have noticed, it's very inefficient to always be writing cells 11, cell 11. If you want to do multiple operations over a same range or cell, you can use with. When using the with keyword, you are actually telling Excel you're about to perform a series of operations over a particular object. In this case, we're going to do all these operations to the cell 11. So we no longer need this. This will actually work the same and is even more efficient than the previous scenario, because when you write in each line cell 11, you are telling Excel in each case to search for this object. Whereas if you put the with statement, Excel only has to search once and perform all these operations. It is more efficient to do it this way. As you can see, the result is exactly the same. To be even more efficient, we can concatenate various with statements. For example, as you can see here, we're changing the font parameters. So we can do the following. With dot font and with what we are telling Excel here is that he has to search the cell 11, perform this operation, get from the cell 11 the font parameter, change its values to what we are saying here, and that's it. This is the most efficient way to write this code down. Also, it makes it really easy if we would like to change the position of the cell. We just have to change the numbers here. We have already seen how to change the values of a cell, how to change the font, and now we can see, for example, how to change the color of the font and the interior color of a cell. To do so, for example, for the font, you can do dot color equals, and you can use one of the constants of Visual Basic, for example, Visual Basic red. You can also create your own color using the RGB. RGB, basically, you are mixing red, green, and blue. It's a value that goes from 0 to 255. In this web page, for example, you can see what combination of red, green, and blue you need to use to create any of the colors that appear here. So, for example, you would like to create this bluish color. You see that you have to set red to 35, green to 20 and blue to 240. If we now execute this code, you will see that the color of our font will change to red. As you can see, here is the result. Now our text is completely red. Now, for example, we can change the color of the interior of the cell. To do so, we can use interior.color. For example, we're going to use Visual Basic blue, for example. If we click play, and now we go back to Excel, we can see what's the result. Here we have now that our text is red and the back color is blue, which is a very terrible combination to use. But as you can see, you can use any kind of color. Back in Visual Basic, we can also change the horizontal and vertical alignment of our cell. For example, we can write dot horizontal alignment, and we use one of the Excel constants, like for example, Excel center, or dot vertical alignment, and we also center it. If we now execute this code and we go back to Excel, we can see what's the result. For you to see better the result, I'm going to extend a little bit the cell and this one, and as you can see, our text is perfectly centered. Another thing that you can do in Microsoft Excel, but that I strongly recommend that you don't do it, is merge cells. To do so, let's look at the following example. Imagine we want to merge cells B4 to D5. To do so, we can do the following. Range B4 D5 dot merge. If we now execute this code, all those cells will be now merged. As you can see in Excel, all these cells are now merged. As you might have guessed, to actually merge a group of cells, you just have to do a merge. And as you can see, now they are totally unmerged. Now I'm going to show you something very important. This is a very common mistake that lots of people do when creating macros. As you can see, I have now two Excel workbooks opened. Let's say I only want to create the big square here. If I click this workbook and press play, the code will be executed in this workbook. But if I accidentally click this workbook and press play, as you can see, my macro will run in this other workbook. Sometimes this is not the desired result. To avoid this behavior and avoid any kind of mistakes, we can use some additional parameters to always make sure that our code will be running in the Excel workbook that is running the actual code. To do so, we just need to add with this workbook dot worksheets, and we can now put the name of the worksheet that we are using. In our case, is sheet 1. And we end the with statement, and we add the dot here so that Excel understands that, hey, I want to work in the workbook that is actually running the macro. I want to go to the worksheet, sheet 1. I want to access this cell, and I want to change all these values. To show that this actually works, I'm going to delete the values that the workbooks currently have. I'm going to select this workbook, and I'm going to execute the code. As you can see, we get the expected result. Now, I'm going to click on the other workbook, and I'm going to execute the code. As you can see, it didn't create here the text. And to show you that this is actually working, I'm going to delete again this column. I'm going to click this workbook, and I'm going to execute this code again. As you can see, this is working as intended. I'm going to show you that the problem actually happens, for example, if you have multiple sheets. As I showed in a previous video, if you write this, you create a comment, so the code actually doesn't execute this. We are currently saying, hey, I want you to do an operation in this cell, but hey, what cell 1 will be the macro using? The macro, by default, will be using the active sheet. In this case, our active sheet is sheet 1. We now click sheet 3, and we execute the macro. As you can see, it's created here. That maybe is not the desired result. This is why it is so important to actually refer to the workbook that is currently running and to put the sheet that you want to work on. Although it is not mandatory, it is strongly recommended. Remember that for a with statement to work, you should always add a dot before. For example, with this workbook worksheet sheet 1, and now I'm saying cell 1 is not inheriting all this behavior. To do so, I always have to add back the dot. In here, you have an example of the code that we just did using the with statements, and here, without using the with statement. Both codes will actually do the same. The difference is that if, for example, you change the name of your sheet, you will have to go through all these lines changing them manually. Or if, for example, you want to change the cell, you'll have to go through all these lines changing them also manually. Another disadvantage is, for example, that each time you are doing this call, Excel has to search for this specific workbook, for this specific worksheet, and for this specific cell, the amount of times that you are using it here. Whereas with the with statement, he just has to do the search one time, and then he knows he has to change all of these properties. This means that this code will be much more efficient and will run faster. For small codes, you will not notice this, but when you start creating bigger codes, which tend to operate much complex stuff, you will notice this a lot. To summarize, in this tutorial, you have learned how to change the properties of the cells. For example, the font properties, the interior color, the color of the font, the horizontal and the vertical alignment. You have also learned how to use the with statement. Also, you have learned some tips on how to do a proper call to a cell by using this workbook and also referring to the worksheet that you want to work on.